Chapter 1. The Unexpected Encounter. General Zephyra had seen her fair share of galactic battles, but never had she experienced anything that would challenge her authority in quite the way she would encounter tonight. As the commanding officer of the Zerthian Empire's most formidable warship, she had conquered star systems, obliterated entire fleets, and left a trail of civilizations in her wake. The Zerthians were a race of warriors who thrived on battle, their survival tied to their prowess in combat. And Zephyra was the epitome of that tradition, an apex predator in a universe filled with countless species and endless conflict. No one dared challenge her. No one questioned her decisions. Until now. She had arrived at the Olas 9 space station for a simple diplomatic mission, a necessary meeting to discuss terms with the humans of Earth, whose expanding influence had begun to encroach upon Zerthian territories. The humans, unlike the other races in the galaxy, were strange, full of contradictions. Their technology was still in its infancy compared to the advanced weaponry of the Zerthian Empire, yet their unpredictability, their tenacity, made them a challenge that Zephyra couldn't ignore. The humans had no regard for conventional rules of war. They fought with a ferocity that was both maddening and intriguing. The meeting had been a disaster from the start. The human envoy, Captain Marcus Rook, was unyielding in his demands, challenging everything Zephyra had worked to build. His arrogance, his apparent disregard for the power of the Zerthians, infuriated her to no end. He had spoken as though the fate of the galaxy was something they could share, that their empires could coexist without understanding the depth of what they were playing with. She had not come to negotiate. She had come to dominate, to show the humans their place in the grand scheme of things. But Rook, he had been different. There was something about him that piqued her interest, something in the way he carried himself. His eyes never wavered, even when she leveled her most intimidating glares. He didn't flinch when she growled in her native tongue, a sound that had broken the spirits of far more powerful beings. Instead, he had smiled, a calm, steady grin, as if he had already won, as if he knew something she didn't. That was the first mistake, underestimating him. The night had taken an unexpected turn when, after the meeting ended in bitter silence, Zephyra had dismissed her staff and retired to her private quarters on the station. She needed to think, to recalibrate. The human captain's words had shaken her, though she would never admit it to anyone. The audacity, the way he had looked at her like he was a predator, sizing up its prey. It was the first time in her life that she had felt vulnerable in the presence of another. She had the reputation of being unshakable, but in the depths of her mind, a creeping thought gnawed at her. What if the humans were more than just a nuisance? As Zephyra sat in the darkness of her chambers, the silence broken only by the hum of the station's machinery, she heard a soft knock on the door. At first, she ignored it, thinking it was one of her subordinates seeking to report something trivial, something that could wait. But then the door slid open without permission, and before she could react, a figure entered. Captain Rook, dressed in his standard human military garb, with that same arrogant smile plastered across his face. "What are you doing here, human?" Zephyra's voice was low and cold, laced with venom. "This is no place for you." Rook didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped further into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click. He wasn't afraid of her, and that was something Zephyra hadn't encountered in a long time, an enemy who didn't fear her. "I came to speak with you, General," he said, his voice smooth, as though he were addressing an equal. "I figured we might settle this disagreement without the formality of the council chambers. Just you and me." Zephyra stood up from her chair, her towering frame casting a shadow over Rook. Her golden eyes narrowed, a growl rumbling deep in her throat. "Leave, before I make you." Rook's eyes met hers, unwavering. "You think you can just order me around? You think you can command me like you command your soldiers?" His words were almost mocking, and for a moment, Zephyra was taken aback. Her mind raced, trying to process the audacity of this human. "I'm not afraid of you, General. I'm not afraid of anything you can throw at me." Zephyra's fist clenched, her knuckles cracking under the pressure. She wanted to strike him, to show him the full force of her power, but something held her back, something in the way his voice trembled just slightly, in the way his posture seemed to challenge her, yet he didn't show a hint of fear. He was baiting her, and it took every ounce of self-control not to lash out. "You're out of your mind if you think you can stand against me," she growled, stepping closer. You think your pathetic human strength can match mine? Her voice was thick with contempt, her alien features contorting in fury. Rook, however, didn't seem intimidated. Instead, he stepped closer as well, the air between them charged with tension. I don't need strength to defeat you, General, he said softly, his words cutting through the thick silence. All I need is to outsmart you. And maybe show you a different way of thinking. Zephyr froze. Outwit her? This human, this captain, dared suggest that he could best her with his cunning? Her instincts screamed at her to throw him across the room, to end this madness before it escalated further. But her curiosity, something she hadn't experienced in years, kept her rooted to the spot. She couldn't explain it, but there was something compelling about him, something that made her want to know more. Why don't you show me then? She challenged, her voice rough with frustration. Show me what you think you can do, human. Without warning, Rook stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His hand reached up, and in one swift motion, he cupped her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. There was no fear in his eyes, no hesitation, just determination. And, to her surprise, there was a hint of tenderness, something she hadn't expected from someone so brash, so daring. You're wrong about humans, General, Rook whispered, his breath hot against her skin. We don't fight the way you do. We don't need strength. We need heart. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand that after tonight. And then, as if on cue, his lips pressed gently against hers. The kiss was not what Zephyra had expected, nothing like the brutal, calculated strategies she had employed in her countless battles across the galaxy. There was no aggression, no dominance in the touch, and yet it was electric. Her mind reeled, trying to process what had just happened. This human, this insignificant creature in the grand scheme of the universe, had just made a bold, uninvited move. But it wasn't the act itself that rattled her, it was the way it unsettled her in a way nothing ever had before. Her hand twitched, reaching up as if to strike him, to shove him away, but then she hesitated. She was not the kind to hesitate. The Zerthians were warriors, known across the cosmos for their ruthless efficiency and relentless might. She had bested entire fleets, slaughtered rival generals, and watched as entire worlds fell under the crushing weight of her will. But none of that seemed to matter in this moment. The touch, gentle, insistent, brought forth a feeling of vulnerability that she had not allowed herself to acknowledge. A small part of her, a part she loathed to admit existed, responded to it. But the human did not pull away. His lips lingered for a moment, soft and warm against her cold, metallic demeanor. There was no fear in him, only an intensity that seemed to deepen with each passing second. And just as quickly as it began, he pulled away, his eyes searching hers, gauging her reaction. Zephyra's breath caught in her throat, her golden eyes burning with confusion and anger, but something else flickered beneath that curiosity. What have you done? She demanded, her voice low, fierce. But inside, her heart was racing, and she despised herself for it. She was not supposed to feel this way. She was the predator, the one in control. And yet, here she was, vulnerable in front of a human. Rook stood tall, unshaken. He tilted his head slightly, studying her reaction. I've shown you what your warriors never did, he said quietly. There's more to strength than power, General. There's power in trust, in vulnerability. But you wouldn't understand that. The words stung, but he was right in ways she didn't want to acknowledge. Zephyra had built her empire on domination, on an iron will that crushed all who stood in her way. It was all she knew. But this human had broken through her defenses without weapons, without violence. Only with a kiss. She was used to being the one who controlled the battlefield, but now, here she was, fighting a battle she never expected to fight. And she didn't know how to win. You're bold, Zephyra growled, her voice laced with frustration and something else, something she didn't want to admit. But you underestimate me if you think you've won. Never said I won, Rook replied calmly. Just showing you that you have something to learn. He stepped back, his eyes glinting with a spark of mischief. And now, you're going to learn that lesson, General. The air between them crackled, a silent challenge. Zephyra's chest rose and fell with the intensity of her emotions, a mixture of anger, confusion, and something else. Something that pulled her toward him despite her instinct to push him away. Chapter 2, A Battle of Minds. The next day, Zephyra found herself on the command deck of her warship, her mind far from the tactical operations at hand. The ship was in perfect working order, as it always was under her leadership. Her officers moved with precision, each one knowing their place, anticipating her orders before they were even given. The warship was a marvel of Xerthian technology, an extension of her will. But today it felt hollow. The silence in the air was deafening, broken only by the hum of the engines and the occasional voice of a subordinate calling out orders. Zephyr's thoughts were consumed by the human captain Marcus Rook, his boldness, his unexpected defiance, and the kiss that still lingered on her lips. She couldn't rid herself of the feeling of it, and she couldn't stop wondering why it mattered so much to her. Why had he done it? What was his game? General, there's an incoming transmission from Captain Rook. A voice broke through her thoughts. It was Lieutenant Tira, her second-in-command, a Xerthian soldier loyal to the core. Put him through, Zephyra commanded, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. She watched the hollow display flicker to life, revealing the familiar face of the human captain. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Good morning, General," Rook said, his tone casual, as though they hadn't shared an intimate and chaotic moment the night before. "I trust you're well rested after our little encounter?" Zephyr's jaw tightened. She wanted to snap at him, to remind him of his place, but she swallowed the urge. "What do you want, human?" Her voice was cold, calculating, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of the uncertainty she was trying to hide. Rook leaned forward, the screen showing a subtle glint in his eyes. "I want you to see things from a different perspective. You've built an empire on conquest, General, on strength and domination. But that's not all there is to power. I'm not here to fight you, I am here to teach you something you've never learned. To show you what it means to truly lead." Zephyra stiffened, her golden eyes narrowing. She had conquered countless worlds, torn down empires, and ruled with an iron fist. But in his words, there was an uncomfortable truth. She had never truly understood leadership the way he spoke of it. "You think you can teach me?" she growled, leaning forward. "You think you, a mere human, can show me anything? I think I can show you everything you've been missing," Rook replied, his voice steady, unflinching. "And I think, deep down, you know I'm right." For a moment, Zephyra was silent. Her thoughts spun like a storm inside her head. Every instinct told her to reject his words, to crush him underfoot. But a part of her, the part that she had buried for years, was listening. She was listening because, for the first time in her life, someone had dared to challenge her in a way she couldn't fight back against. He hadn't used force. He had used something far more dangerous. He had used her own doubts. "What do you propose?" Zephyra asked, her voice barely a whisper. Rook's smile deepened, his eyes lighting with a glimmer of victory. "I propose you stop thinking like a conqueror and start thinking like a ruler. Come meet me, General. Not as an enemy, but as a potential ally. I'm offering you something greater than conquest. I'm offering you a chance to see how the humans do things. To learn from us." Zephyra's heart hammered in her chest as she stared at him. He was right. He had her in a corner she couldn't escape. She had built her empire on power, but she had never understood true leadership. This human, this Captain Rook, had just pulled the rug out from under her, and she didn't know whether to kill him for it or thank him. Zephyra's mind raced with conflicting thoughts as the transmission from Rook ended, leaving only the hum of the ship's systems to fill the silence. Her instincts screamed at her to reject him, to throw the human's words into the void where they belonged. He was nothing more than a nuisance, a temporary obstacle to her conquest of the galaxy. She had spent her life honing her strength, her resolve, and the Xerthian Empire had flourished under her leadership because of that unyielding drive. She was the embodiment of Xerthian might, unyielding, powerful, and incapable of being swayed. And yet, Captain Marcus Rook had done the unthinkable. He had challenged her in ways no other being ever had. Not through weapons, not through military might, but through his words, his presence, and, most disturbingly, through his understanding of power. Zephyra had never felt the sting of doubt before, and yet now, as she sat alone in her command chair, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting inside her. "General, we are ready to depart for the human space station." Lieutenant Tira's voice interrupted her thoughts, snapping her back to the present. Zephyra stood, the sharpness in her movements betraying none of the chaos she felt within. "Prepare the fleet. We'll meet them in neutral space. I'll see this through." Her voice was firm, but inside, her mind was far from certain. Was this truly the path she should take? To meet the humans on their terms? To entertain the possibility that Rook might be right? She couldn't afford to doubt herself, not now. Not when her entire empire was built on certainty. And yet, something in Rook's challenge tugged at her. She had to see this through. The Zerthian fleet readied itself for the journey, its advanced ships gliding through space with lethal grace. Zephyra stood on the observation deck, watching as the stars stretched into lines of light, her eyes reflecting the vastness of the galaxy. The endless reaches of space had always felt like her domain, but now, it felt different. There was an uncomfortable sensation in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years, uncertainty. She had not been a general for so long by showing weakness, and yet this human had made her question everything she thought she knew. What was his game? Why had he come to her? Was this about more than just some petty negotiation over territory? Zephyra couldn't fathom it. It didn't make sense. But she would soon find out. Chapter 3, The Human's Proposal. The journey to neutral space was uneventful, the fleet moving with the precision of a well-oiled machine, but Zephyra's thoughts were anything but steady. She couldn't stop thinking about Rook, his words echoing in her mind, his gaze, his touch. Everything about him challenged her, rattled her. And with each passing hour, the feeling deepened. She knew that once she stepped foot on the human space station, there would be no turning back. She had to face him, and she had to decide whether to crush this human underfoot or to listen to him. The moment they arrived at the station, Zephyra was met with an odd sense of expectation. The human station was smaller than the Zerthian warships, but it radiated an undeniable aura of purpose. It wasn't a place of grandeur or imperial might. It was a place of cooperation, and that alone unsettled her. She had built her empire on the belief that domination was the only path to true power. But here, in the heart of human space, there was something else, an unspoken balance. Zephyra strode through the docking bay, her guards trailing behind her, the sound of their heavy boots echoing in the sterile, metallic hallway. The human soldiers lined the walls, their eyes following her every step, but they didn't flinch. They respected her presence, but there was no fear in their gazes. They weren't afraid of her. And that, too, rattled her. At the end of the corridor, Captain Rook stood waiting, his arms crossed over his chest, his stance relaxed but alert. He looked completely unbothered by her arrival, a stark contrast to the battle-ready general that approached him. General Zephyra, Rook greeted, his voice calm, yet filled with an undeniable confidence. I'm glad you accepted my invitation. Zephyra said nothing for a long moment, just studied him with her intense, golden eyes. She could feel the weight of the moment, the challenge in the air. Every instinct told her to order her troops to secure the station, to take control. But something about Rook held her back, an inexplicable pull that made her pause. You think you can change me, human? She asked, her voice low, though it held no hint of the anger that had marked their first encounter. There was a growing curiosity in her tone now, something new and unsettling. Rook's lips curved into a smile. I think I can show you something you've never seen. Not by force, not by intimidation, but by understanding. Zephyra's jaw tightened. What could you possibly show me that would make any difference? She demanded, her voice sharp. You think your human ways are superior to mine? Rook shook his head, a playful gleam in his eyes. I don't think I'm better than you, General. I think I'm showing you a different kind of strength. A strength you've never considered. The silence between them stretched, and for a moment, Zephyra felt a flicker of something unfamiliar stir in her. Was it doubt? She shook her head, clearing the thought. No, she was the conqueror. She was the one who shaped the galaxy, not this human. You've spent your entire life fighting to be the strongest, haven't you? Rook's voice cut through her thoughts. You've built your empire by crushing everything in your path. But what if I told you there's another way? What if I told you that true strength isn't in destruction, it's in creation? What if I could show you that you could lead without crushing the spirits of those around you? The words hit harder than Zephyra had anticipated. She had always believed that strength lay in domination, in control. But now, this human was suggesting that she could lead differently, without fear, without breaking others beneath her boot. Could she really do that? Could she find power in something other than fear? I don't know what you're offering, Rook, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her usual confidence wavering. But I'm here, and I'm listening. Rook stepped closer, his expression softening. Then let's start with understanding. I'm not asking you to give up your empire. I'm asking you to see it through a different lens. Let's build something better together. Zephyra looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception, any weakness. But there was nothing but sincerity there. Could she truly trust him? Could this human, this strange being from a distant planet, be the key to something greater than herself? She didn't know, but she was about to find out. Zephyra stood silently, her thoughts racing as Rook's words swirled around her. The gravity of the moment settled upon her like a heavy weight. She had spent years building her empire, shaping it with an iron fist, and watching as those who dared oppose her were crushed beneath her power. To even entertain the notion that she could lead differently without fear, without overwhelming strength, was not only absurd, but also a betrayal of everything she had ever known. Yet, as she looked at Rook, she could feel something inside her slowly shifting. The human didn't seem to want her submission. He didn't ask for her obedience or allegiance, he simply asked for understanding. He wanted her to see the galaxy through his eyes, not as a conqueror, but as a ruler who built alliances and inspired loyalty through mutual respect. It was a concept so foreign to her that it almost seemed impossible. But then she thought back to her empire, the countless worlds she had destroyed. The destruction, the chaos, the fear, it all felt so empty. Her empire was vast, powerful, but it was built on fear. And in the quiet moments, in the solitude of her command, she couldn't shake the thought that perhaps, just perhaps, there was more to power than domination. I don't trust you, Rook, Zephyra said at last, her voice hard, though a trace of doubt lingered beneath her words. I don't trust your methods, your ideology. But there is something in what you're saying. Something that makes me question the path I've been walking. Rook's gaze softened, his posture relaxed but firm. You don't have to trust me, General. I'm not asking you to. But I'm asking you to trust yourself. To trust that you're capable of being more than just a conqueror. You've built your empire through fear, but I believe you can build a legacy through strength, honor, and trust. Zephyra's mind raced, torn between the woman she had been for so long and the woman Rook was asking her to become. She felt the weight of his words pressing down on her, urging her to reconsider everything. It was not an easy decision. Nothing ever came easy for someone who had spent their entire life as a warrior, as a symbol of unyielding power. To turn away from that was like asking a star to stop burning. She closed her eyes, her breath deep and steady, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel the quiet in her mind. What would happen if she took Rook's offer? What would happen if she truly led with understanding, not just power? I want to believe you, she said, finally looking up at him. But I don't know how. Rook stepped closer, his voice gentle yet firm. You don't have to have all the answers right away. No one does. It's about taking the first step, one step at a time. I'll be there to help guide you, General. But you have to trust that it's worth trying. The space between them seemed to shrink, and for the first time in their strange relationship, there was an understanding. It wasn't trust yet, but it was a beginning. And Zephyra knew that something had irrevocably shifted inside her. Whether she could change, whether she could embrace a new path she didn't know. But the seed had been planted. I'll give you one chance, human, Zephyra said, her voice steady, though tinged with uncertainty. But if you fail me, I will crush you. And I will never hesitate to do so. Rook nodded, unfazed by her threat, the same calm smile never leaving his face. I'm not asking for more than you're willing to give, General. I'm asking for a partnership, nothing more, nothing less. Chapter 4. The Birth of a New Legacy. Weeks passed, and the Zerthian Empire was on the brink of something entirely new. Under Zephyra's command, the Empire had started to change not through the brutal conquest of worlds, but through diplomacy and negotiation. With Rook's guidance, the once fearsome general began to see the power of unity and the strength in building bonds rather than destroying them. Together, they began to form alliances with races that had once feared the Zerthians, earning their trust, their respect, without force. Zephyra found herself in the midst of something she had never thought possible, a peaceful negotiation. It was slow and frustrating, at times, as she fought against old instincts, but the results were undeniable. Her empire was growing, not through fear, but through cooperation. And it felt right. Rook continued to stand by her side, his support unwavering, and gradually, Something she never expected began to form between them, something that had no name, but it was undeniable. They had forged a connection, not just as allies, but as something deeper. One day, after another successful diplomatic mission, Zephyra stood on the balcony of her quarters, overlooking the bustling hub of the newly formed Intergalactic Council. Ships of all sizes, from all races, floated in the station's docking bay, a symbol of the cooperation she had never thought possible. Rook approached from behind, his footsteps silent on the polished floor. He stood beside her, his eyes taking in the view as well. The stars stretched out before them, endless and full of promise. "You've done it, General," Rook said, his voice filled with quiet admiration. "You've built something that will last." Zephyra didn't answer immediately. She was too lost in the moment, in the sight of the new empire she had created, not one born of fear, but of hope. Hope that she had once thought was a weakness. Now it felt like a strength. "I never thought I could do this," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of the journey she had undertaken. "I never thought I could lead this way." "You always could," Rook replied. "You just needed someone to remind you of that." She turned to face him, her golden eyes searching his face. There was no arrogance now, no challenge, only a quiet understanding between them. It was strange, this bond that had formed between them, but it was real. And in that moment, Zephyra realized something she hadn't known before. She didn't need to be feared. She needed to be understood. "Thank you, Rook," she said, her voice low and sincere, "for showing me that there's more to power than just strength." He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made his eyes shine with warmth. "Thank you, General, for believing that something better was possible." Zephyra took a deep breath, looking out at the stars once more. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of her empire lift from her shoulders. She was no longer just a general. She was a ruler, a leader, and she was ready to face whatever the future held, together with Rook by her side.